It's 2009. Felipe Massa used to be a racer like you, then he took a spring to the head. Michael Schumacher is enjoying his retirement, but gets the call to return to the Scuderia. Such a return was thwarted by a motorbike accident, but what if that had never happened? I'm Peter, I'm joined by Nedzo's F1 Gridbox and Ace Shield, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast.
This is the DRS Train.
So, a little known fact from the past that some people may have forgotten is the fact that after Massa took his injury in Hungary in 2009 that put him out of action for the rest of the season, the first person that was called up to replace him was in fact Michael Schumacher. This very nearly happened, but was thwarted because he took a neck injury from a motorbike accident earlier in the year. But what we're going to do today is basically look at how things would have gone if he had in fact returned with Ferrari for 2009, and then if he had stayed on instead of going back to Mercedes. So yeah, another bit of alternate history. Just at the start, I think Nedzo, give me some of your first thoughts on what you think may have happened.
Well, obviously, I wasn't into F1 at the time because I was 5-6 years old. But looking back on it, I think it was a time full of potential because obviously, with hindsight, we know how Schumacher did at Mercedes. It wasn't like he came back from multiple years away and was off the pace. And I think that how do you come back with Ferrari? Also, the fact that it's Ferrari, it wasn't the most competitive car in 2009, but towards the end, it was somewhat here or there, and Kimi was winning races. I think that he could have at least won a race, and it would have given him massive hype, and people would have said he can come back and he can win another title with Ferrari.
I don't have anything to add for now, until we get into the actual story.
Okay. Well, we can cut this section. I'll come to you anyway now. So as well joining us today, as we have a 50% of our main panel, but we have, as ever, our Italy correspondent, Ace Shield, to bring us on. So, yeah, you seem to have some interesting data on this. I mean, it was very close to happening, and I remember at the time there was a lot of hype because he was testing some of the previous Ferraris, and we did get very close to seeing him come back in red.
It depends on how you define close, because yes, at one point there was the confirmation that he would have substituted Massa for Valencia, and then immediately after the denial. And the point is, Luca Cordero di Montezemolo didn't want Michael back, and so Montezemolo would have done everything possible to avoid Michael's comeback. So close, yes, because at one point he got the confirmation, but also not close because as long as Montezemolo was leading the team, Michael was never coming back. So we've got to understand the position of Michael inside the team. He decided to retire at the beginning of 2006, although he didn't tell almost anybody, and only announced it properly in September at Monza. Then in 2007, he was basically the partner of Ferrari. He was involved in development. He also did the test sessions at the end of 2007, and then at the beginning of 2008 on the 2008 Ferrari. And then kept being involved in the team even into 2009. You can see in Malaysia the image of him extending the hand out of the pit wall to check if it's raining or not. Or if it isn't him, it is Luca Baldisseri. Okay, maybe I got this part confused, sorry. I should check. Anyway, although Michael was involved, since he left and being a driver, since he retired, the dream team in Ferrari was coming undone. Jean Todt eventually started leaving out his roles until he became FIA president and was no longer involved at all with Ferrari. Ross Brawn left for Honda in 2008. Rory Byrne's contract as a consultant for Ferrari ended in 2009, and it won't be renewed as it was before. And then after the debacle of Malaysia, Luca Baldisseri, which was a friend of Michael and also the head of technicians at the pit wall, And basically, he was the guy who was expected to take over the role of Ross Brawn. And after the debacle of Malaysia, he completely left the team. So slowly, Ferrari was starting to become no longer Michael's team, not how it used to be. And that clearly is because Luca Cordero di Montezemolo didn't want to have this again a trio like Schumacher, Todd, and Braun under him with so much power, and so he started to change. Domenicali took over, then he signed Raikkonen before, and then Alonso with the sponsor Santander. And so under these circumstances, it is easy to see that Michael would never have made a comeback with Ferrari, simply because who was leading the team would never have allowed it, and simply because the conditions that were in place when Michael left were no longer present when he wanted to come back. Then, on the other hand, there is the fame of Michael, his legacy. And so clearly everyone in Italy loved him, everyone at Ferrari loved him. If he said anything, they would immediately follow him. There was this way of work, which with Michael worked incredibly well. When he went to Mercedes, this way of work was considered outdated by the team. Anyway, Michael was extremely powerful inside the team. So when Massa actually got injured, he literally was the first choice, and he immediately started getting involved in simulator work, in working out. He had gotten fatter, he had gotten less physically fit. You can see even in 2008 when he does the test session at the beginning of the year, the mechanics inside the team jokingly tell him that you've gotten bigger, Michael. But the lap time was still there. And anyway, in 2009, he has, as soon as Massa gets the injury, he starts to train again. He gets back to simulator work to get along with the car. But it's tough work because of two reasons. So first of all, Ferrari has this simulator, which is called Ragno, Spider in English. And it is a simulator in which there's a screen in front of the driver, and then the seat, the car thing in which the driver sits in, is attached to a lot of mechanical hydraulic implants to simulate the movement that happens with the car on track. And with some drivers, this is completely fine. With other drivers, they cannot couple the difference they get from this in a sensation of inside the cockpit from what's actually happening in front of them. Because in the simulator, it is not the car moving and moving around the world. You are fixed in place inside the screen and you get shoved around by these mechanical arms. And so in the case of Michael, he felt ill whenever he tried the simulator work.
Motion sickness. Yeah.
Motion sickness, thank you. He used to get the feelings of burping. There's another word.
Not nausea, basically, and yeah.
Nausea, and he also sometimes actually, how do you say vomitare? Burp.
Vomit.
Vomit,
Threw up, yeah.
Vomit. Yes,
Vomitare,
he actually used to get nausea and vomit even. But anyway, he was really excited. He was really pumped up, and so he pushed through even these issues. The other issue he had was actually the 2009 Ferrari, because the 2009 Ferrari had the car system. And the car system was this weird device because, unlike all the car priors, the cars brakes the car when you are braking. And so whenever the driver has to go under braking, he has to dose the brake pedal in accordance with how much the cars, the kinetic recovery system actually breaks the car, and so it's something you have to get used to. Let alone Badware, but Fisichella was having an incredible year up to that point. Once the Forciglia became good, he went to Ferrari, and he never got. He could never get along with the car system. He was unable to get used to it. Okay, that's the word. He just couldn't get used to the system. He had an horrible season in Ferrari. I mean, it was Ferrari, it was his dream. He knew it might happen, but still getting annihilated by Raikkonen wasn't because Raikkonen actually has that edge over Giancarlo. It's because Giancarlo wasn't able to get used to the car system, which is something that, to a lesser extent, Michael also would have suffered. I mean, Raikkonen would have had a half a year head start over Michael. So if Michael had actually made the comeback in 2009, he would have gotten beaten by Kimi Raikkonen quite substantially. But anyway, he's getting ready to come back to not Monza, to Valencia, that's what the race after, when he gets told that he would not be driving for the team in 2009. And the reason this happens specifically is because, yes, Michael was getting ready to make a comeback to substitute Massa, but Michael had bigger plans. He wasn't preparing just to cover Massa for the remaining half of the year. He wanted a full-time drive for 2010 and beyond. He wanted to make a full comeback, not just half a dozen of races. And whilst he only had to drive for 2009, he would have gotten the drive. But as soon as his demands extended to a full-time drive, Luca Cordero di Montezemolo said, "No, you are not driving at all." And from this refusal comes the entire story behind Luca Badware getting the seat. Because when Michael got the refusal to give him the seat for 2009 and beyond, he imposed on Montezemolo that in his stead it would be Luca Badware driving. And Luca Cordero di Montezemolo had to give in his demands, and so Luca Badware was announced first to the team that he would take over Massa's place. And the riot ensued, because in the team they understood very well that Luca Badware simply wasn't suited, he wasn't fast. Probably because he wasn't driving till 10 years, and probably also because of a big crash he had in testing in 2000. But anyway, there is nothing they can do, and so Luca Badware gets the 2 races, Valencia in Belgium, and then he is so bad that they have to substitute him. And so they substitute him with Giancarlo. And meanwhile, they announced Alonso. They announced it in September or later. I don't remember, October maybe. Yeah, no,
Sometime around then. It'd been known. I mean, it had been decided well before that he was going to join them. But yeah,
much like Kimi Raikkonen joining, and it was already known by Imola 2005 that he would join Ferrari for 2007.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is basically the story behind 2009. Why Michael didn't get the drive. But this episode isn't about why Michael didn't get the drive. This episode is if Michael gets the drive for 2009. Nedzo?
I think one point we've missed about both Badua and Michael is their ages, because Michael in 2009 was 40 years old. And I mean, Badua, when he came back, was 38. Obviously, we know that Badua had 10 years out of full-time F1 experience. He'd been doing testing work ever since. And even before, I think his first year at Ferrari was 96, where he left 40. But like Michael, like as much as he was, even when he left, arguably still top 2 drivers on the grid in 2006. When he came back, obviously, it's not like Alonso, when he left F1, he went and did WEC, he went and did Indy. He had experience elsewhere. Michael had done a little bit of motorbike racing, and that was it. Like, I think the fact that he had no recent experience, and the fact that you mentioned the issues with the 2009 Ferrari. It was temperamental at best. No one other than Kimi could make it work. We saw that with both Badua and Fisichella. Whether Michael, being Michael, always being the adaptable driver he was, could just adapt, we don't know. But I think had he won a race in that 2009 stint, had De Montezemolo, as you say, not stepped his foot down, if that had happened and he won a race, I think it would have been perfect on a marketing and a PR perspective to put Michael in that car instead of Raikkonen, who was on his way out anyway. That could have maybe shook up the driver market because they wanted Alonso and they wanted Raikkonen out. So they'd have had to, if they wanted to keep Schumacher in the PR, they'd have had to have Alonso and Schumacher, which would have been an amazing partnership had it worked well.
Mm. So with Badoa, so yes, he hadn't raced since driving for Minardi in '99, but since then he'd been one of their main test drivers alongside Marc Genet, who'd left a few years before him. So the main issue he had is that in 2008 that testing ban was brought in, so his mileage plummeted, and it meant that because the testing was down to effectively zero by 2009, he'd never driven the car before, and it was a completely different type of car that also had slick tires, which he hadn't raced with since '97, if he was even on the grid in '97.
It was 96 with 40.
Yes, he hadn't used slick tires since in 13 years, and again the aerodynamics were completely different. And you mentioned the KERS system, which only a couple of teams had in 09 anyway, and it was very primitive.
Temperamental as well.
Yeah, so it was that combined with the fact that he was just kind of average as a driver anyway meant it wasn't ever going to go well. Schumacher is different because it's his team. He's a considerably better driver, and he'd been still racing up until 3 years earlier. So even though, and again, he was used to slicks, and I mean, he hadn't driven that car before, but he would have adjusted to it easily enough because that's what he tended to do. So he would have. I think had he done it, he would have gotten along okay. I mean, I don't think it would have necessarily been any worse than when he actually did join Mercedes themselves, because he joined right around the time that the car got. Well, he would have joined right around the time that car got good, when it had that mid-season swing that came at basically the same time as McLaren's, and they suddenly broke. Well, certainly ahead of Brawn and at times ahead of Red Bull as well.
So you mentioned Marc Genet. So I'm gonna take this chance to just cover a bit more the discussion about 2009, about the things that happened. So I explained why they chose Luca Badoer, because Michael imposed it upon Montezemolo when he was rejected. But technically there was another test driver, and a driver who had raced in Formula One more recently than Badoer, and his name was Marc Genet. And Marc Genet, actually, when he was told that Luca Badoer would get the seat, he got extremely angry. But it's not only, he didn't get the drive, not only because Michael imposed Badoer, but also because of a certain event 10 years prior. And so we are in Nürburgring, 1999. And there's Luca, who's running 4th place on a Minardi, incredible, when the gearbox's case cracks and he has to retire. And this is an absurd retirement, by the way. The gearbox's case should never break. Anyway, he broke, he retired, and that promoted, if I remember correctly, Häkkinen into 5th and Irvine into 6th place. In the 7th place.
Yes.
And there was Marc Genet in 6th place.
Yeah.
And Marc Genet defended against Irvine until the very end to score a single point for Minardi. And this Ferrari did not take this defense very well, because Irvine was fighting for the title with Häkkinen, and that point actually would have made a big difference. And so there was this grudge from 10 years prior, that another reason why Marc Genet will not get the drive in 2009. And about Badoer, just covering his 2 races, I want to briefly read what's written here about his stint. On the Valencia track, one only needs to stand outside any turn to see the big error that Ferrari made. Badoer is unable to brake at the same point of everyone else, of accelerating at the same point of everybody else, and at tracing the same trajectories as everybody else. Rob Smedley, which was his race engineer for those two races, was saying, oh, no, come on, Luca is executing his program quite well in his attempt to defend the undefendable. And anyway, another part, they're at the post-race conference in Belgium, where they interview the race winner and then the last at the finish line. And this is surreal. And anyway, there is Jonathan Noble, who Alberto Antonini describes as having the same empathy as a fox inside a chicken hen. And anyway, when it is Jonathan Noble's turn to make question to Badwer, he says, do you realize that for us, your name and surname are read as "Look how bad you are"? And that's all I wanted to say about Badwer.
Can I just make one point about Badoer and another driver? Well, the thing is, I think had he continued, I know he couldn't really continue because it was just an awful stint. But had he continued, I think in the race at Spa, he had the fastest first sector out of anyone throughout the entire race. And there were a couple of other little things. Also, a driver we haven't mentioned, one of the only, I think, Ferrari's first ever development driver around that time, Jules Bianchi, was also in contention for that seat, apparently, even though he was only in like Formula 3. What was it? I can't even remember what he was in at that time. It was a season before he joined GP2.
This was before he joined the Ferrari Driver Academy.
Was it?
Yeah, I think there was a possibility of something happening in 2010, but not. I doubt they would have done anything for 09.
Okay.
But who knows? He would have been. He would have been 20.
Around about 20, because
So
he was late joining F1, Bianchi was.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been too young to do it, but just kind of inexperienced because he still had 3 or 4 more years of everything else to do. But yeah, I suppose for Badoer, one thing that sort of helps him slightly is that, well, Fisichella was better, but still not brilliant in that Ferrari.
No
I mean,
point.
he didn't score any points with them. And it was just not being able to adjust to it well. I mean, he'd come off that. He basically got it because he had one good race in that Force India and almost beat Kimi. It's like, oh, well, you'll do better than him, so we'll give it to you in Italian. He's probably wanted to race for them his entire life, so why not?
Okay, so if we're covering how well Badwer actually did, there is, of course, those 2 races don't define his entire career. And the point is that at the beginning of his career, he was actually a very prominent talent. He had won the
F3000 title in 92.
Excellent. He did at the end of 1993, he had the chance. Okay, yes. At the end of the 1993 season, Flavio Briatore allows him a test at the Estoril with the Benetton. And that is this first big chance for his career. And it gets ruined by crashing at turn 1. And so that was the first big occasion. And the second big occasion is Nürburgring in 1999, as I already explained. And so the first time it was his fault if he didn't get any better car. He probably would have gotten a better career if he had done well in the test instead of crashing. But yes, how good was he? Certainly was not good enough to make a comeback after 10 years and expect him to be competitive. So those 2 races shouldn't tarnish his legacy, but at the same time, it's just, he was really, 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 really bad in those 2 races.
I would put Badoer on the same level as most other midfield kind of drivers at that time, the likes of Carl Wendlinger, the likes of maybe not Olivier Panis, but those kind of guys who were hovering and always taking those little midfield seats, whether they be the likes of maybe not Johnny Herbert, because I mean he won a couple of races even if he was lucky every single time. But yeah, but I think Badoer was a decent driver. Like it was just the machinery he was in. He was in a 40, then he was in a Minardi. You can't really work with much. Yeah, there's not really much to work with, kind of thing. That's what I think with Badoer. But yeah, I mean, also there's a weird thing with Fisichella. Fisichella's last ever Formula One race was in a Ferrari. He never got a seat in the 2010s. I'm surprised by that because he was still like 30, 35, 36. He could have carried on. He just didn't.
That's my like Nelson Mandela syndrome. I always forget that he didn't go into 2010. I feel like he should have joined one of like Lotus or something like Trulli. Yeah, instead of Liuzzi staying on.
But Fisichella really, it was his dream to drive for Ferrari. And so he actually said it in a later interview about 2009 about his choice to go to Ferrari, because they asked him, if you had stayed at Force India, you would have gotten maybe even a win or other very good results because the car was very good. Did you think that when you chose Ferrari over Force India? And he said, yes, I knew that I was probably leaving for a worse car, but driving for Ferrari was my entire dream. I could not give this occasion up. And anyway, even after 2009, he still is driving with Ferrari in the GT categories. So he still is a Ferrari driver.
Oh yeah, because it was only for 2010 that he was like one of the reserves alongside. I think Genet was still there, but I think Badoer left for 2010, didn't he?
I think Genet had already left Ferrari a few years earlier because he went and started doing Peugeot in Le Mans and that. I think he left around 2007.
Oh, okay. So it was Fisichella, Bianchi, and someone else then. I can't remember who it was in 2010.
Yeah, I can't remember. They've always got about 10 reserve drivers at any one
all
time.
Of them and most of them are over the age of 40. Like,
yeah, well, I mean,
for ages.
Yeah, I mean, when HRT folded, he came to them. Genet has come back as a brand ambassador, and he keeps tagging along to the car launches, even though he never drives the cars anymore. I don't know what. Yeah, it's a weird gig. He still has.
Esteban Gutierrez at one point. Like, why?
They had him for a year in between his stints with Sauber and Haas. They just get anyone. They have a similar approach to the Red Bull Junior. Just any old sod can be a reserve driver. Enter Artur Leclerc.
Oh god,
nepotism on legs.
Don't even get me started on him. But yeah, should we move into what would have actually happened if Schumacher had come back? Well, do we want to start at Valencia then?
Yeah, I mean, okay. Well, in the future, this ended up being the best result of his comeback with Mercedes, but that was 3 years after this. So, as well as a new car being out of the game, he has a new circuit to try.
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily. I think people's expectations would have been very high, but I wouldn't have expected any miracles in the first couple of races. Maybe. I mean, to be honest, I don't even remember where Kimi finished in that race, so I'd need to use him as a benchmark.
That's a good point, actually. We want to get Wikipedia up, lads.
Yeah. The F60, because the thing is, they tried to get him to test the F60, but he wasn't allowed to because of the testing restrictions. So all his testing was in the 07 car.
Did he also do some testing in the GP2 car as well?
Yes, he did. No, that was in January in preparation for Mercedes.
Oh, okay.
So that was when he already had that. So they did that for him, and yeah, I think it was the new gen of GP2 car anyway. Okay, so Kimi finished third, and Badoer was 17th. So car was good. I think Schumacher could have well in the points, absolutely. I think
top 5.
Again, I don't know because I don't remember. All I remember from that race is Vettel's engine blowing up. Like it's one of those ones where nothing happened.
I'm gonna have a look at the gaps and see what the gaps were like.
Barrichello won it, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Kimi finished third, 15 seconds off the lead. Then it goes 5th place. Rosberg was 20 seconds off the lead, so maybe not.
Yeah.
I'd think he could have finished around maybe 6th or so. He would have been in the points because 8th place Kubica was 36 seconds off the lead, about 15 seconds off of Raikkonen.
Yeah, I think he'd have been in the points if nothing else. That would have been fine. Spa, well, a podium might have been possible there because Kimi won the race.
And also, it's one of Jumi's best tracks.
Yeah. I don't know. So that would have been better, at least.
Yeah. Ace, do you want to speak on any of those?
So I'm just gonna give my overall impression, and my overall impression is that Michael would have scored points towards the end of the year, but at his comeback, I don't think so. But it's a really big if, because we actually never saw how well Michael was doing, even in the simulator work. If we had someone who knew, we could ask him. Maybe in the simulator, even with all the sickness, he was giving back excellent results. So maybe he would have been competitive right away. I just think we can't know, so I believe he would have taken some time to get back to be competitive. He would never have gotten to the level of Raikkonen. There was simply too much time too much experience on the CAS system to recover for Michael to match Kimi. And but I think Michael would have gotten points towards the end of the year.
Yeah, then the next couple of races, what were Italy? I mean, Monza. If he doesn't do well at Monza, that'll be a disgrace. Singapore, he hadn't driven Singapore before. That'd have been fun to see what he did. Suzuka, Brazil, and Abu Dhabi. I mean, he hadn't driven Abu Dhabi, but he would have done just fine at Suzuka or Brazil, I think.
I mean, it should have pointed out that Abu Dhabi and Singapore, like Kimi was outside the points in both of those races, so that was just ones where the car wasn't strong anyway.
Yes.
So it wouldn't have been, it would have been relatively unremarkable, but there would have been some points here and there. Enough to affect their position in the constructors. I don't know. Well, actually, no. They could have. They only finished 1 point behind McLaren, so I think they could have taken McLaren for third. So that would have been something. That does bring the big question about what happens from 2010. Is that do we think there's a possibility that he would have stayed with them?
Okay, so
and that would have been in place of Massa more than likely.
To analyze the situation, we have got to decide some different scenarios. So, first scenario is Montezemolo says, Michael, you cannot drive for 2010. If you want, you get to do the 2009 races, but nothing more. So, in this scenario, Michael gets to the end of 2009 of Ferrari, and then he looks for a seat at another team. And this is a pretty interesting question. Now that they see Michael's comeback and he gets a few points, but nothing impressive, no wins, no podiums, which team would take him on? Do you think the new team Mercedes would actually still hire Michael?
Yes.
I mean, they took him without having this comeback, so yeah, they're going to take him.
I mean, I also think that because Braun and Button and Barrichello had both left, they might not have had many other options. Because obviously Rosberg was coming in, they'd have preferably wanted a German because double German lineup for a new German team would have been fantastic. What'd you say?
Nick Heidfeld.
Yeah, but he was already at Sauber.
No, he was Heidfeld was free because his seat got taken by De La Rosa at Sauber.
Oh, did it?
He became a Pirelli. Or was it 2011? He became a Pirelli test driver.
I suppose you could also argue Timo Glock. Toyota had just folded, but
yeah, Glock would have taken that if he could have had it. Hülkenberg probably not because he was a Williams reserve, test driver, and So there were basically this was all Schumacher's influence. There were all these Germans to pick from that they could have had. I think for the sake of the podcast, we need to find a way of putting Schumacher in that Ferrari because otherwise the podcast we've reached the end of it basically.
That is easy. That is easy.
Yeah.
So let's just end this scenario in which Michael has to look for another team in 2010. So what we concluded is that yes, he would not have had a brilliant 2009 season at Ferrari, but that would not have been enough to not convince Mercedes not to pick the Michael Schumacher. the legacy is just too much even after a bad half a year. They probably would have said, yes, we understand that he needs some help to get back up to speed, but when he will be as strong as ever. He won't be, because we saw what happened in Mercedes, but they would have believed that when they signed him for 2010 in this scenario. The other scenario, therefore, is Montezemolo either falls or he's convinced that Michael will not create another big, powerful hierarchy under Montezemolo's rule. And so Montezemolo would have, one way or another, accepted to give a full-time seat to Michael for 2010. And so in this case, the lineup would be Alonso, which took over Raikkonen because they paid Raikkonen off, and Michael taking over Felipe Massa, which it would not have been nice to do given Felipe was bedridden, but it would have been possible. Legally, contractually, it was possible. There just wasn't the will to do it in what happened in real life. But in this scenario, the will exists, and so Michael gets the seat for 2010.
One thing I will just say is I think in terms of logistics post 20 or post 2009, I think that Alonso would be the better option as a Schumacher teammate, because let's be honest, even though Massa was good pre-accident, him going up against Michael just like he had in 06, I think that he wouldn't have the emotional and the mental fortitude to basically pin Michael down and stop him from taking over. I think Alonso wouldn't let Ferrari build the team around Michael, whereas Felipe would be less inclined to stop them doing that. It would be harsh to drop Felipe after something that wasn't his fault and the accident that everyone, and he would have had to find a seat somewhere else. He would have probably ironically gone to one of the 3 new teams because everyone else was pretty much full up and it doesn't look like he'd fit in at somewhere like Mercedes or something like that. So he'd probably gone to like a Lotus or a Marussia and basically had to build his career back up. But I think Alonso and Schumacher would have been a very interesting thing. And also the way, because Schumacher started off 2010 not from memory, but from what I know, he started it off quite slowly. Whether he would have started off slowly or whether he'd have gone straight back into things quite quickly because he had that experience in 09, we don't know. And that could be a good avenue to go down.
I mean, regarding Alonso, in 07, he basically was unable to prevent a rookie Lewis Hamilton from building the team around him. So I don't think there's much he could have done to stop Schumacher from just taking over upon returning to his own turf. But yeah, if we assume now he has that seat, this does then beg the question of, well, what happens to Massa? What happens to that vacant Mercedes seat? And as we've seen, there are some options to fill it. I mean, yeah, Massa, there would have been something worth trying there, I think, for other teams, certainly. An easy one might have been that instead of Degrassi, he just gets the second Virgin seat with Glock. And I feel like the most...
lineup, to be fair.
Yeah, Degrassi, Glock and Massa, yeah, it would have been... it wouldn't have made much difference because the car was awful, but it would have been bad. And then Heidfeld seems like the most obvious choice for Mercedes.
Yeah.
What do you think about Renault, Lotus? But no, it was still Renault. So
Yeah.
Renault taking
yellow Renault or green Renault or green Renault.
Yellow Renault.
Axel Renault. So Renault taking Massa instead of Petrov. Do you think it would have been possible?
Maybe. How much was Petrov's sponsors, like Lada, bringing in?
I have no idea.
I think that he mainly got that seat because of his sponsors. It wasn't because of performance.
Yeah.
Because if he was bringing in like tens of millions, they wouldn't have dropped him. And also, that's actually a very Slavic lineup, so that's maybe what they were going for.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when the announcement was made. It wasn't until the end of January that he was announced as at the very last minute.
It's an option. It's an option that we could have done.
If he'd got the seat like 6 months earlier, it's like, okay, that's done and dusted. Because he joined right at the last minute, you could say, well, actually, Massa might sweep in and take that instead. And he obviously would have chosen that over Virgin.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think Glock, I'm trying to remember with Virgin, he took them on because they gave him, I think it was because they gave him undisputed number 1 status or something of that nature was why he took that on. And he's like, well, it's better than nothing, I guess.
I assume there was no options at him for Mercedes or Renault or anything.
Yeah,
like
well, he was a Toyota driver, and
Yeah.
BMW Sauber weren't big fans of him because there'd been some contract dispute before.
That's a good point with Heidfeld, actually. Would his previous ties to BMW prevent him from driving for Mercedes?
Probably not. If he's no longer contractually bound to BMW, then I don't think they can really stop him from doing that. Because he did join Mercedes in some fashion, didn't he? I feel like I've pictured him being a test driver.
That's because of his McLaren days.
No, I can picture Heidfeld in a Mercedes somewhere. I think something like that happened. Maybe it was 20. Yeah, this definitely happened.
I keep thinking you're thinking because he was the same. It was like 2004. He was like a McLaren reserve or like a development driver.
No, he was at Sauber he was at Jordan 2004.
Why do I keep thinking that? Because I swear he was in some sort of
Sauber,
development.
Lotus,
Unless I'm thinking of someone like Alex Virtus or someone like that.
He was considered for Mercedes, and then it went to Michael. Oh no, he was made a test driver for Mercedes in 2010. But the thing is, he never drove the car at all.
Oh, okay.
So they tore the contracts up, and then they released him so that he could become a Pirelli test driver, and he did that for like 2 months, and then he went and replaced De La Rosa at Sauber.
And then he went to
Lotus, and then got dropped early again for fucking Bruno Senna, and then he was done. Like, yeah, that was a random one. Why drop him over Petrov?
And then Senna. Like, come on.
Yeah. So that, yeah, on that basis, I think it would have been Heidfeld to Mercedes. Yeah, then we could say Massa goes to. Oh, that would have been funny if Massa finds himself, thwarting Alonso's attempts to take the title in Abu Dhabi. Now,
that'd been funny, yeah.
Instead of that would have been interesting.
The other scenarios are Massa goes to Force India because Force India ended 2009 strongly, so it was a good prospect for 2010. But maybe it was a better choice for Massa to go to Sauber, which was still linked to Ferrari, and it was his previous team, which he drove for. So Renault, Sauber, Force India. With Sauber, he still keeps the links with Ferrari. With Renault, Force India, he completely cast them off. I'd say that if he has a choice between Renault and Force India, he definitely chooses Renault.
Yeah.
So Force India is very unlikely. So it's all about does he keep the links for Ferrari or does he drop them entirely? I'd say in 2013 he completely left Ferrari. He went to Williams on a Mercedes engine. So yes, if he were dropped at the end 2009, he would completely cut Ferrari off and go to a different team entirely. So I think 2010 is indeed Massa to Renault.
Yeah. So Schumacher at Ferrari, Massa at Renault, and Petrov never gets a seat in F1.
Basically, yeah. I mean, if he'd gone to, Sauber does sound realistic. He would have done that instead of De La Rosa. I think De La Rosa would have just stayed as a McLaren test driver, not testing the car. Yeah, the Renault one works. I mean, it's a reasonably competitive car. But Schumacher at Ferrari, because now Ferrari have a genuinely competitive car, and he's had more time to prepare himself. He wouldn't have taken the title, and I don't think he would have beaten Alonso, but he would have been a darn sight better than Massa.
Yes. Massa was the only driver of the top three teams to really not perform. I think Schumacher would have been kind of there or there. He'd have definitely got at least a win or two.
Massa was leading the championship after the first 3 races.
Yeah.
But after that, just fell off a cliff.
Quite random.
Yeah.
So Alonso had to retire in Malaysia and have all those issues. And then bad start in Australia. Vettel had the problems. Lewis
got spun around in Australia as well.
Massa's 2nd, 3rd, 7th was enough for him to be leading.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Michael could have because obviously they went to Korea for the first time, and that was in the pouring rain. New track for everyone, new wet conditions. I think he could have done well in places like there.
In the Well, in the actual, I keep forgetting he's actually here just as a Mercedes driver. He finished fourth in Korea, so he did all right. I mean, okay, the race was mental. But in a Merc, he did okay. I mean, I think we could just take all of his results and just move them up 2 or 3 spots, and you've basically got his Ferrari results.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's probably, because Massa was about 70, 80 points away from Button, who was in 5th.
I think it would have probably halved that.
Yeah.
So the positions ahead is 1, 2. Okay, so I'm just gonna do
Some maths.
yes.
Yeah, I definitely think he'd have won Korea. I'm trying to think of he got a couple more 4th and 5th places in 2010, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he had it. It was almost. I think it was his best season actually. Slightly better than 11.
What statistically or like overall?
Points and position.
Because I think
Yeah,
2012 was his best return season.
he finished 4th 3 times in 2010.
Which races were those?
It was Spain, Turkey, and Korea.
I think he could have done well at Turkey. Spain, maybe not, because that was. I'm trying to think because obviously Lewis dropped out right away. I'm not sure if Lewis was ahead of him when that happened.
Okay, 2011 was slightly better. He was 8th instead of 9th overall and 76 points to 72.
He could have won Canada. I'll tell you that much. He was running 2nd in the Merc right until the end.
In 2011, yeah, but not in 2010.
Oh yeah, not in 2010, absolutely not. But
no. See, now my brain is going back to front because it's a driver that was already there, but now we're just putting him in a better team.
Yeah.
Okay, the big question: would he have won a race in that car?
What, in 2010?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. Base, what do you think?
There would have been 1 win, maybe.
So I just did a quick math. So with the 25 points for the winner point system, being 3 places ahead is about 2.5 times your actual points. I went for 2.5 times so that I can kind of compensate for the fact I'm not actually calculating how much point the other driver lose if Michael finishes further ahead in the field. And so with this 2.5 factor, Michael, instead of scoring 72 points, scores 180 points, which is 6th in the standings behind Button, Hamilton, Webber, Alonso, Vettel. He basically has 40 points more than Massa.
That's about what we were saying before. And also, was the Mercedes less reliable than the Ferrari or more reliable?
The Ferrari was pretty good for reliability because I remember Vettel was the one getting screwed all the time and Alonso picking up the pieces.
Look, Michael has a retirement in Abu Dhabi and in Malaysia. I'm gonna check what retirements are.
Abu Dhabi was a crash. Malaysia was mechanical.
Which very finally also Alonso got a mechanical issue. So
right at the end, and then Belgium, he was taken out by Barrichello. So otherwise, no mechanical problems.
So maybe not that reliability, but yeah.
Massa again, his only retirement was in Suzuka. Was that an accident? 2010, Suzuka 2010.
Doesn't ring a bell.
And then Rosberg and the other Mercedes, Hungary, Japan, and Korea. Korea was an accident. The cars are very reliable, actually, some of them.
Massa in Japan had a collision at the start, and other retirements for collision at the starts are Vitantonio Liuzzi, Vitaly Petrov, and Nico Hülkenberg.
I think Petrov crashed with Massa. I think I remember that.
Man, there was the crash in 2012 that Rosberg was in. 2010.
Yeah, 2010 Petrov cut across someone. I think it was Massa because I remember talking about that for my.
Oh yeah. Because he goes off in the wall at the start, and like 4 people taken out. Rosberg's wheel came off after a pit stop. I remember now. Yeah, he crashed off of that.
But yeah, I think Michael. I think the race that Michael would have most likely won in 2010 was Korea because it was wet and it was a new track for everyone. Those are two, he's a very adaptable driver, and I think that's one place he could have done really well.
And with Vettel retiring for the lead, kind of invites it because Alonso won that race in the end.
I don't think he won it by being amazing. He won it by not being as bad as everyone else.
Yeah, I mean the race. There was hardly any of the race actually happening because they red flagged it for so long, and
it takes off like 17 laps.
Yeah, it takes. It was a very. I mean, because they I think they finished it early, or they just about got the full distance in, but it was getting very dark at the end.
Yeah.
So the other two possibilities. I'm not convinced about Korea, but technically possible. If he's good and he beats Alonso, then yes, he wins the race. The other possibility is Hockenheim, because clearly Michael and Alonso would not be second drivers.
Oh, yes.
They would be not in orders. So Hockenheim, if he gets a start as good as Massa, he wins the race.
Yeah.
And the other race, Monaco, because the Ferrari was the best car that day, at least in the hands of Alonso.
He just needs to start on pole. That's the only problem, and I don't think
he crashed in qualifying, didn't he?
In FP3,
and he went from last to sixth.
And that was the overtake at the last lap under safety car, which wasn't safety car, but safety car according to.
I shouldn't have been penalised. I'm sorry.
Well, that was Michael, wasn't it? Didn't he do that? Yeah, he did. He did get penalised for that.
That's what I'm saying. He shouldn't have, though.
Yeah. Well, Monaco again. Well, basically every circuit was a strong one for Michael. But yeah, Hockenheim, you can say, well, they're like, oh, Fernando is faster than you. He just goes, no, he isn't, and then pulls out.
Drives off.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds very realistic. Actually, winning Hockenheim. So there could have been, let's say 2 wins.
Maybe if he's competitive in 2010. Because honestly, if he sucked as he sucked with Rosberg, but against Alonso,
I think it would have been. These results are better. I think there would have been that people would have realised. Okay, well, Alonso is at the peak of his powers, and also Schumacher's been out and out of the game for 3 years, so he's not going to be at 100%. But I think it just surprised everyone to see him being beaten like that by Rosberg, who wasn't really rated massively highly at that point.
I'm just going to check.
Wasn't seen as a future champion.
Yeah,
I'm just going to check something. Hold on. I don't think I have any actual data on it, which is annoying. But I did find like in these seasons, although we got beaten by Rosberg in the point standings every single year, it wasn't that convincing from my memory.
It got better in 2010. It was quite a disaster for Michael. In 2011, it started to get better, especially after Canada. And in 2012, without all the mistakes and BS aside, he was basically on par with Nico.
Yeah, 2010, Rosberg got almost double his points and got 3 podiums as well. 11 was definitely close. 12, like, he had a lot of bad moments, and by the end of the year, the car was really bad, and neither of them were scoring points.
Schumacher was definitely the better driver for 2012 for me. But we'll get onto those once we get to them.
And we still have to decide if Michael actually gets more than 2012 on the Ferrari.
That's another good point. We'll go to 2011 first. So 2011, Ferrari, obviously the Red Bull was miles clear of everyone. I mean, obviously, it's the case of the Ferrari won a couple of races in the hands of Alonso, but he was still third quickest behind McLaren because Button put in a fantastic year that season. Does Schumacher take a win in 2011? I think he could do it at Canada, as I said, because he got what was it, 4th in that race, and he only lost out towards the end when it started to dry up and that Mercedes wasn't as good.
I feel like the Ferrari, it's hard to say because they just didn't seem to be as strong at that one. I mean, Massa was being a train wreck, but Alonso was famously taken out by Button. They just didn't seem at that point the Ferrari really wasn't that strong because they didn't have the blown diffuser. And then once everyone else has got banned for one race, Silverstone, suddenly Alonso wins and then goes back to being behind Red Bull, McLaren and that.
Was that his only win that year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that.
I mean, he had a lot of podiums, but yeah, it was just couldn't keep up with the McLaren or the Red Bull, really. And still finished, to be fair, he still finished like only 1 point behind Webber and only 13 points behind Button, who was runner-up.
It was a year in which Red Bull dominated, and if it wasn't for whatever reason Red Bull dominating, there was McLaren second best clear. So yeah, if Red Bull made mistakes, it was McLaren who won races, not Ferrari. The only race Ferrari won was the one race they made illegal blown diffusers.
Yeah.
And it still needed a slow pit stop for Vettel and then rain throughout the race. So
I went to that race. Can't really remember much of it now, but yeah, I was there.
So anyway, I think rather than talking about the performance, how well they would have done, I think a way more interesting idea is how Ferrari would have moved. Because we've got to remember, Alonso had a contract for 2010 and 2011. Then he had to renew it. In real life, in the middle of 2011, he extended the contract until 2016. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 5 years extension on a contract. It's very big.
Especially when he was like 30 years old.
I don't remember his age, so he's born in 1981.
81, yeah.
So yes, he's exactly 30 years old.
5 years extension for a 30-year-old is fucking huge.
Yeah, now Aston Martin is giving him 2 years extensions for a 43 years old. So how things change. Hamilton gets a 3 years at Ferrari at 40 years old. So
Was it 1+1?
I thought I thought I was 1+1 as well.
Yeah, Lewis's is 1+1, isn't it? Button in 2010, he had an extension of like 5 years. He wasn't allowed to say at the time because it just said multi-year extension. I remember the BBC asking him, and he's like, "How much is multi-year?" And he just goes, "More than 1 and less than 10."
Oh, that's fucking obvious.
Yeah, I think that contract actually carried him until, I think that was a 6-year. That was a 5-year one. It carried him until the end of 2016. And that,
So-
but yeah.
anyway, going back to my hypothetical. So in this scenario, Alonso is not the number one driver and Michael is not the number one driver, which is very weird because Alonso quite vehemently wanted the number one status when he was at Ferrari. The same thing with Michael, he wanted uncontested number one status. So already this scenario that in 2010 we have Alonso Michael as a lineup it's not really sustainable because neither one wants to not be both of them want to be the number one driver. So the fact that neither of them is, neither of them likes it. So I think there has got to be made a choice in 2011. So either you drop Michael and put a number two driver alongside Alonso, and that means Alonso to cover the team. Or you say, bye-bye Alonso, we decide to keep Michael and just put a different driver alongside him because you two cannot work together. Or third scenario, they somehow manage to convince both of them to remain, to keep the status quo. At this point, I think the scenario in which they choose Michael over Alonso is very unrealistical because we basically said that in both years Alonso outperforms Michael. And so it would be very weird if they choose Michael over Alonso. It still might happen just because Alonso is heartbroken after the title defeat, and so he starts to have attritions and grudges with the team, and so they start to be decoupled from one another and they can work together. And so in this situation, Michael manages to extend his contract and they say bye-bye to Alonso. But this is unlikely, in my opinion. It would mean that Michael is able to build the team from scratch around himself. How would that work? I have absolutely no idea. The other scenario is they choose Alonso over Michael, in which case it means that Michael has failed to create a team around himself to propel the team to victory, as he did with Todd and Brown in 1996 onwards. And at this point, we go back to the same scenario. Who do we put alongside Alonso? I guess we put Kubica, but Kubica gets the crash. Who do they put alongside him? I guess they can pick Perez, they can pick Trulli. There are so many choices. I remember the silly season of 2012. Every name was alongside Alonso. Maybe they managed to get Vettel that year for 2012. But
To be honest, I think that although yes, Alonso wouldn't have outright number one driver status, and I know Alonso is petty, and I know that he always likes to be seen, not just be the best, but be seen to be the best as well. I think the fact that Schumacher wasn't necessarily threatening him in terms of taking points off him, I don't think he'd have seen it as much of an egregious thing as he had seen with Hamilton, as he had seen with other teammates who were just on his level. I think that they could have. I not necessarily worked in harmony, because two big drivers with big personalities are never going to work perfectly well. But I think they could have continued, and the fact that maybe, well, obviously Alonso had arguably the best season of his career in 2012. Schumacher had arguably the best season of his return in 2012. They could have been an underdog, a very underdog operation. They could have even. I know they got second in the constructors in real life just because McLaren's engines are made out of paper, and Kimi Raikkonen was carrying Lotus. But I believe that those two in 2012, because they've definitely done something well. I know obviously Michael could have had quite a few more wins and potentially stayed on even further because he picked it up in 2012.
I mean, I think Alonso probably would have been enjoying the situation, because it's like, okay, well, I beat him in a Renault, and now I'm beating him on his home turf. So for him, he would have been like, well, this is great. Yeah, let's keep it going. Keep beating the best.
Yeah.
While losing to Vettel.
So, assuming that Michael continues, we are all leaning towards the status quo in which both gets extended. Or, I mean, there is still the scenario in which Michael has a 2-year contract, 2010 and 2011 with Ferrari, and then, just like he did with Mercedes, once the contract ended, he retired again. So, do you think that if Michael's contract ends in 2011, he retires?
I think we do a classic 1+1. I think he does 2012, and then based on performance, he'd go into 2013. I think he would. I think because 2012 was a good season for Michael, or in the Mercedes it was, so you can assume that in the Ferrari it'd be decent as well. I think he would have stayed on to at least 2013. It's the last year of the V8 regulations. Not much to adapt to. It's only when you start getting to 2014, I think, that you can properly say that there's a very small chance that he'd continue, because it's brand new regulations, brand new everything. And Ferrari
if Ferrari weren't massively invested in hybrid technology, there wouldn't have been much development going on in the way there was of Mercedes. They thought, well, I'm not going to. These new cars are going to be very strange, so I think I'll kick it now. And at the age of 44, almost 45 by that point.
Yeah. How do we think he'd have done in 2013 had he stayed on?
Okay, first, before starting that, let's cover what we went through for the scenarios. So, we are following the scenario in which Michael and Alonso are teammates in 2010. Michael gets about 70, 80 points less than Alonso in 2012, and he's not fighting for the title, but some wins occasionally. In 2011, he gets closer to Alonso, but he's still outperformed. And we assume that he both extend into 2012 and beyond.
Yeah.
At this point, we have to take in account another variable, that is with in real life with the lineup Alonso Massa, Ferrari wasn't competitive. In a sense, not just the cars, obviously they were not as competitive as the Red Bull, but the team overall, it was not a winning team. We covered in another podcast the 2012 season, and I spoke at length about the updates and the development race throughout the season. And the end result of that podcast was that Red Bull was able to bring developments and improving the car in a much more efficient and reliable way than whatever McLaren and especially Ferrari were able to. And that is how Red Bull won 2012. It is how they dominated 2011, and then they went to dominate 2013 when the tires changed. So with Alonso and Massa, the Ferrari just remained there, not a winning team. Neither Alonso wasn't able to turn it into a winning team. Would Michael, after having been there in 2010, in 2011, and now we extend it to 2012 and will do 2013, will Michael turn Ferrari again into a winning team? At Mercedes, they were saying that Michael's procedures were outdated, but at Ferrari they were not. They would have followed him. Maybe they would have worked if those. If Michael's way of working would have worked, he would have been able to turn Ferrari into a winning team, or would he also have not been able to turn Ferrari into a winning team simply because he's not able to bring the triad back of another Braun, another Todd to build the team from scratch and make it a winner team?
It depends what he focuses on, because if he focused on his own personal glory, he would have developed that team to be really good in 2012 and 2013. But if he was doing the same role that he had at Mercedes, he would have been developing the cars and telling them to develop the turbo hybrids for 2014 when he wasn't going to be there. So if we say he would have developed it for when he was there, then I mean he could have potentially had the cars developed to his style. He could have had the team just in general working a lot more congruently. Because although yes, his procedures would have probably been outdated, we saw that the Ferrari didn't win a championship in the hands of what we had before. So if they'd listened to him, they would have at least been able to roll the dice and see what would have happened. Is whether he focuses on himself or whether he focuses on the team. And if he focused on the team, maybe we could have seen Alonso become a champion with Ferrari, not in 2012 or 2010, but in 2014 or 2015 if they'd have focused on the new regulations. But if he was to focus on himself, then maybe we could have seen. See again, even if they'd have focused on him and built a car around him, would he have beat Alonso in 2012? Probably not. And would he have beat him in 2013? Yes, but then he wouldn't have beaten Vettel because the Red Bull was so much better. And I don't think he'd been able to bridge the gap there. It's a tough situation to decide.
Peter, opinion?
Yeah. 2013. I mean, the general performance that year from Ferrari was kind of the same as 2011. I mean, that season there's a lot of parallels there with the way Red Bull dominated, and I mean Alonso did get 2 wins. He won Spain, and was there one before then as well? Unless Spain was the only win.
The one before was Bahrain, and the one before Bahrain was China. I also won China and Spain.
Oh, so 3 races, not 3 races.
In Bahrain,
not 2.
there was the DRS issue, which the first time, and anyway, he lost a lot of time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was actually very mixed up. The first half of that season, even though that season is like utterly forgettable, it was quite close at the start, at least, even though it wasn't that good.
It was also very messy for Alonso. I remember in 2014, so very good the first race. In second, lost a win to Raikkonen. Then in Malaysia, there is the crash at the start, and then they don't beat him, and the crash retires. He wins the third race in China. Then in Bahrain, there are the DRS issues. And again, fine the first time, but he had the issue a second time because he used it when he should not have, and so lost a podium out of that. Could have won and instead finished way down. Then Spain, he won it. Then in Monaco, a horrible race for Alonso because, as it turned out, in 2014 Monaco, so Massa had issues with the brakes. And later, when they inspected the car, they found out that they had assembled a piece in the other way around, and so it was not assembled properly, and that developed a brake problem, which led to Massa's retire. Alonso had no way of knowing that during the race, and so he started, when he knew Massa retired, he started to save on the braking as much as possible, just to get to the end. And so we saw him very off the pace and overtaken by Sutil, and the other one was Button, correct?
Potentially. I know Sutil finished 5th that race. He overtook so many people at the hairpin. That was quite good. but I don't remember about Button.
So anyway, another issue for Alonso, another race. Then they went to the race after is Canada.
Yes.
Yes, Canada, he was second place, so very fine race. And then there is Silverstone, which is a complete mess because all the tires blew up. I'm not skipping over any race, correct?
I
No.
don't think so. What, the Nürburgring after Silverstone?
Yeah.
Okay. And then it was Hungary, then it was Spa, and then the rest of the season, yeah.
Okay, so anyway, the start of 2014 for Alonso was very messy because every other race there were issues.
Yeah.
So what was I going with this?
I don't fucking know.
I mean, I think that, well, Schumacher, I think at this point would have still been getting outperformed by him as like, well, the team's not making any progress. I know already that hybrid thing's going to be useless, so let's just throw in the towel now. So that, yeah, well, it means he has a slightly more decorated career in the end. There's a couple of wins thrown in and
Could he get to 100, do you think?
8 wins
9
across.
wins? No.
Another 9 wins across 4 seasons is a big ask. I'm not even sure if Alonso did that.
He got 11 with Ferrari. 5, 1, 2, 3. 11.
Yeah,
And 0.
Alonso's not getting 9 wins. Schumacher's not getting 9 wins in that time. So I think that, yeah, he would have had. He passed 300 race starts. Was it 306?
Yes.
So you can add another 20, 21 on. So he might have just overtaken Rubinho.
Yeah, he would have overtaken Barrichello by 1, I think.
Yeah, that's enough. He would have become most experienced driver in history. That I guess after that, one thing then that this doesn't affect 2014 because Alonso would have stayed. Kimi would have gone there. Well, actually, thinking about this on the Mercedes front, does Hamilton still go to Mercedes in 2013? Like, what's happening?
He could have gone to Ferrari if it. I mean, I know they weren't really in terms of development and stuff, but you could have easily seen Hamilton or Vettel go there a year early, even though he was off the back of 4 consecutive
Because
champions.
we obviously said that Heidfeld is going to go there, and I'm sure he would have been fine against Rosberg. It would have been fairly evenly matched. Heidfeld was getting on a bit, but there may well have been the incentive to keep him for 2014, especially if he knew how good that car was going to be.
Well, let me just check how old Nick Heidfeld is.
So Nick Heidfeld
77
in 2000. So that's 6 years before Rosberg. I don't remember the age, but he's gonna be about the same age as Alonso.
I think he was born in 77.
He was, so it would have been.
So he would have been 33 when he joined. He'd have been 36? 36, 37.
Coming around
going
that,
into the hybrid era. So yeah, actually fairly quite a bit. So yeah, 8 years older than Rosberg, but still 8 years younger than Michael. So I think he'd have done it because he was like, well, I know this car's going to be the shit. So let's do this. When we can, anyone's guess if he or Rosberg takes the titles, and both of them would have. Well, they wouldn't have been around much longer because of his age. He probably would have given up after a couple of years and all that. But then Lewis, if we assume that Mercedes is not on the cards, I guess he might have to just stick it out with McLaren, but he kind of really didn't like it there. But he would have
gone to Red Bull after Webber retired.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know if Vettel probably
Red Bull
would have.
could have picked Raikkonen. He could have picked not Alonso, but he could have picked so many other drivers. They picked Ricciardo because it was their driver academy, and they kept picking drivers from the driver academy until 2021. So no, I don't think.
I don't think Vettel wouldn't have been a fan of that as well.
Lotus was Raikkonen left there.
Excuse me, repeat.
Lotus was Raikkonen left there.
Possibly. If he was really bad at predicting the future, he could have gone there. But because the others, McLaren, what is it? Renault, Force India,
no,
doubtful. Sauber,
no.
Probably not. Yeah,
they could have tried to build Williams back up, but that's a bit.
No, Williams were in a complete shambles still at that point. Yeah, this would have actually quite limited his options. He might have just had to stick it out at McLaren.
Like Jenson Button did.
Yeah.
I
And
think
then
so. We are saying that in Mercedes they have Rosberg and Nick Heidfeld, and
Yeah.
so for 2014 they don't have an open spot for Lewis. So
Mm.
that's what we're saying, right?
Yes.
But assuming that Heidfeld also gets a 3 years contract, at Mercedes they have Niki Lauda, who really pushed to get Lewis Hamilton. And I think in 2014 he manages to convince the team to get rid of Heidfeld to make way for Hamilton. I don't think that doesn't happen. I think
another thing we need to think about is that without Schumacher being at Mercedes, if we assume he's largely responsible for the power unit and development, it may not have been as good as it was.
Yeah.
So it may not have seemed so attractive to everyone else, and that would have affected them. And then that would have then had a downstream effect on Force India and Williams as well.
But the
on the
entire
hybrid, yeah.
point of the Mercedes engine is that they had done research on the hybrid technology all the way back to 2007.
Mm.
So Michael might have contributed in many ways, but at the end of the day, Mercedes had a technological advantage over everybody else. Even if there wasn't Michael to make it as dominant as it was, Mercedes would have won 2014, 2015, and 2016. And maybe only then the advantage fizzles out, and in 2017 and 2018 they have finally a challenge, a competition.
Mm.
Maybe. Yeah.
So the end result, Michael going to Ferrari, changes nothing for all the other teams on the grid, but maybe it changes for Ferrari if either he focuses on 2012 and 2014 short term, or if he focuses long term to set up a winning team for another driver.
I mean, at this point, is Massa, is he still bumbling around with Marussia?
Okay, my opinion with Massa
he
does
was a Renault,
2010,
wasn't he?
He does 2011, then he gets dropped for Kimi Raikkonen at Lotus, and we never see Massa again. Or maybe Massa goes to Williams alongside.
Well, why didn't we just keep him and keep Massa alongside Raikkonen and Grosjean never gets a seat?
Yeah, Grosjean, he would just do something else.
I mean, he would have just been another GP2 champion that never got a drive.
Maybe he just goes to IndyCar.
Romain was his manager was Eric Boulier, which was the head of the team.
Right.
So
Okay.
of course he gets the seat for 2012.
Oh.
So either Eric Boulier chooses Massa or he chooses Raikkonen.
Or maybe because Raikkonen initially was rumored to go to Williams rather than Lotus. So maybe it goes Massa, Grosjean, and then at Williams it's Maldonado and Raikkonen.
Instead of...
Or maybe
Maldonado. The other one, Senna. Oh, yeah, Senna.
No. Maldonado brought a lot of money, yes. So, yes, it should be...
Him instead of Senna. And Senna just everyone forgets about.
Oh, no, what a disaster.
Although, no, wait. We didn't consider that Raikkonen asked for a shit ton of money from Lotus. And so Williams would not have been able to pay those money. Lotus didn't pay those money because they didn't have that money. So let alone Williams. Williams has even less money.
If he won in Spain, it's like, well, we owe him 25 million now. Great. So you've undone the win.
Well, I think Maldonado would have taken that win. I think Maldonado would have outperformed him in 2012 anyway. But
there's no Petrov's gone. So what happened? Because Caterham.
He's not going to Caterham.
No. My point is that Trulli just retired during pre-season testing in 2012 or just before it.
Yeah.
They'll probably drag in some nobody pay driver. I don't know. Like Robin Frines or one of them.
Robin Frines. Jesus Christ, that's a throwback.
So, okay. Do we believe Massa is better than Nick Heidfeld?
Which year?
2011.
Well, that was his worst season, Massa, and Heidfeld was still kind of there. I'd take.
I mean, looking at the results again, like, why did they drop Heidfeld? Because he was doing far better than Petrov. Like before that,
but Petrov was bringing money, and Nick was.
And also,
They had
Bruno
to
Senna. Was Bruno Senna hyped at that time?
I think they were the only hype he had was, well, his uncle is Ayrton, and he shat all over Karun Chandok, Christian Klein, and Sakon Yamamoto, so therefore he must be amazing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Heidfeld could have easily got like a seat, like a Force India or even gone back to Sauber or something like that if there weren't other stuff going on. I just think he probably had enough.
Yeah, it was a bit congested because I mean Sauber, like, they would have kept Checo definitely, and Kobayashi wasn't going anywhere anytime soon.
I think he could have easily even gone to one of the 3 new teams if he wanted to desperately stay on, but I just don't think he did, to be frankly honest.
Yeah, I don't think he would have been that desperate because he'd been there and done that already, being in shit cars. So
yeah.
Okay,
Driver transfers are crazy.
just a last scenario I want to cover. So we spoke about 2012 and 2014 very roughly, in the sense that Michael is planning for setting up a winning team for 2014 and beyond. Which means that Michael is trying to make a winning team for another driver.
Yes.
Now, I don't know why he did that at Mercedes, why he created a winning team for another driver. I can assume that because Mercedes is a German team and he's German, and the driver he was setting up the team for was Nico Rosberg, who was technically German. Nico Rosberg should be Finnish, but he managed to get the German nationality.
I mean, I disagree with that, but he doesn't even speak a word of Finnish. Why would he be? The only link he has is his dad. He's born in Monaco or born in Germany, lives in Monaco. Why would he be classed as Finnish?
That's the entire point, because his father was Finnish. But yes, he has the German nationality and always raised with the German nationality. And that was also kind of the plan, because you're never going to have a big constructor from Finland, but you may have one from Germany. And so if they need a German driver, they can look at Nico Rosberg. If Nico Rosberg had raced for the Finnish flag, he would not have gotten a driver for Mercedes. But that isn't really important at this point. What I'm trying to say is, why would Michael create a winning cycle, a winning team for 2014 when he will not drive there? So I can think of a few reasons. One, sentimentality, because he wants Ferrari to bring it back to winning. Another possible reason, because he has chosen his successor, and so he will develop the team because he has in mind who to give the team to. The answer is Sebastian Vettel. So I can imagine that Michael at Ferrari stands there for 4 years to create a winning team and then leave to allow Seb to take over his place. And so for 2014 and beyond, we would get Alonso, Sebastian Vettel on a competitive Ferrari. Maybe not enough to beat Mercedes, but way better than what we actually got. Or the other scenario is that Michael actually develops a winning team for himself, and so he actually aims to set up a winning team for 2012 and 2013. And so in that case, how much better would the Ferrari have been, and how would the Ferrari have performed in those 2 years if Michael had managed successfully to set up a winning cycle at Ferrari?
But he'd also have to get rid of Alonso, or he'd have to deal with Alonso somehow.
Yes, that's the entire point. That's the entire if. How does Alonso fall into all this? Because in my opinion, simply Michael does not manage to create a winning cycle at Ferrari in those 4 years, because he's teammate with Alonso, and we kind of all agree that they will keep a status quo into those years, and so neither of them has the maximum liberty to do whatever with the team and try to bring it back to winning. So Alonso actually had all the liberty possible and failed. And Michael, does he succeed with everything that goes on? So Montezemolo actually didn't want him, but we're in a scenario in which he's okay with having back Michael. But there is no Rosbron, there is no Pirne, there is no Ballisseri. There is a lot of new guys he has to retrain. Is he able to bring back a Holy Trinity again with half of the team because Alonso will surely try to do things his own way? I think he will fail, but that's not funny because if we fail, we just get 2012 and 2013 we got in reality. So the interesting thing is, if Michael succeeds, how would the title battle envelop between Alonso and Michael? Because it would have been kind of like 2007, except a lot of more maturity on both sides of the garage.
I mean, a title battle in 2012. Michael is, I mean, as I said, I think that was the best season of his return. But even then, Alonso was on another level. Obviously, the handling characteristics of that Ferrari would have been different if it was better. The whole kind of Alonso always does better when he's the underdog. When he's not, but you always see him when he's in an underdog situation. He you look at the end of a race where he should be finishing 15th and you see his 7th, and you're like, where the fuck has that come from? But whether that would have been different and whether Michael, because knowing Michael, he'd have done a lot of, as you said, development work. He'd know how to drive that car. He's got all the experience. In the wet races, he'd have an upper hand because Alonso isn't particularly good in the wet. Alonso also wasn't particularly good in qualifying, which, I mean, drivers when they get older don't do well in qualifying generally anyway. So that would have helped Michael out as well because he wasn't particularly outstanding in qualifying. He was still just as good as Rosberg, I think, but wasn't outstanding. It's a case of if he could capitalize on Alonso's weak moments or Alonso's errors, like if he still had Suzuka, if he still had Spa, would Michael be able to then avoid accidents like, for example, he had in Singapore, where he makes his own errors? If he can do a similar thing to a Rosberg 2016, where Alonso has a bad season and he has a somewhat more consistent year, then maybe he snatches a title away from Alonso and then maybe retires at the end of 2012. But I think by the time 2013 comes around, I think that extra year, the extra year will either give him more experience and help him get even more confidence, or it will just mean more arguments and more falling outs, and it will be even worse.
So I'm just gonna stop you right there because I don't like that you think Alonso is not a good wet weather driver, particularly impressive. So Alonso has tons of good wet weather performances. The Brazil 2003, until he crashed, he was very fast. He was with Raikkonen in the fight for the win. Clearly, Raikkonen was ahead at that point. We have the other one, Hungary 2006, obviously. The Nürburgring 2007. In the wet, what's there in the wet? In the wet in 2008, before they chose the wrong tires at Silverstone, he also was very fast. There is South Korea in 2010. He, as you said, was a driver who made the least mistakes and the least misfortune. There is Malaysia 2012, which is a very impressive wet weather win. Hungary 2014. There is wet weather qualifying Canada for 2022 and 2023 and 2024.
Yeah.
Yes, we got 3 years in a row with Canada wet weather qualifying. Wow.
That's
And
just
okay, no, say.
I was going to say, going through some of those, obviously Brazil 2003, you say he was fast until he crashed out. I mean, obviously that river, what do you say?
He was fast, not faster than Raikkonen.
I know, I was saying he was fast, yeah. But the only problem was that river took out about 8,000 people that race. So, again, a race where, okay, fair enough.
A lot of drivers crashed before Alonso that day. And
Alonso
didn't crash because he lost the car in wet weather conditions. He crashed because he was going too fast in a debris zone.
I forgot. Michael crashed out of the river and he crashed out. Yeah, I forgot. Let me think of. So the next one you said was what?
Bad performances. Suzuka 2007. I can think what crashed in 2022.
The things Hungary. You mentioned Hungary 06. Obviously, that was a suspension failure, but we never saw what happened. You said Fuji 07. That's ironic because he crashed out from the lead in the wet.
Yes. He was in the lead.
Was he?
Was second behind. in Fuji 2007, he was second behind Hamilton when he crashed.
Oh, was he? Okay, I thought he was in the lead. Whoops. And then you mentioned, oh yeah, so, what's his name? South Korea 2010. Yeah, that's fair.
Hungary 2011 was won by Button, but also Alonso was very competitive.
Yeah, Hungary 2014 was like he has a few here and there, but I wouldn't like by not an impressive wet weather driver. I mean, not on the same level as much as I don't like to say, as much as the guys like Hamilton, like maybe not Vettel because Vettel wasn't really particularly fun. They just in the 2010s. This is what I'm saying. There wasn't an outstanding, fantastic driver like a Schumacher, like a Prost, like a Fangio, like in the 2010s, like there have been in previous decades. I think that's a problem that we had with that decade. Loads of really good drivers, but none that really stood out.
Okay, I mean, Button was kind of competitive, like all the other greats in the wet.
Only in changeable, not in the wet, in changeable conditions, yes, but not in like wet conditions on wet tires. When it was wet tires on intermediates or intermediates on wets or on dries on intermediates, he was fantastic. But ever in the wet, he was bang average, wasn't he, Peter?
Yeah, he doesn't have the same.
I kind of get what you mean.
Yeah,
So Alonso was good in changeable conditions, not actually consistent wet weather conditions.
yeah,
And inconsistent wet weather conditions, we did not have any outstanding driver in the 2010s. So Alonso look doesn't look good for wet weather conditions, just like all these other drivers. Because
yeah.
no. Okay.
That's just my generic take on the
your point.
Yeah, that's just my generic take on the 2010s. Like I said, like in my video where I did like the best driver in every single season. I think Alonso had 4 titles, Vettel had 2, Hamilton had 4, and Raikkonen had 4. All of those guys were they had seasons where they fluctuated to be better than each other, but overall their career performances equaled out.
Okay. Kind of see your point, yes.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the original point, because you were explaining how 2012 and 2014 were enveloped between Alonso and Michael. So you said Alonso is also not very good in qualifying, and you're completely right. Alonso is kind of as fast as Nico Rosberg in qualifying, which means Hamilton is faster. Max Verstappen is faster. Michael in his prime, obviously faster. Raikkonen in his prime, obviously faster. Vettel, obviously faster. Being as fast as Rosberg in qualifying means there are several drivers that are better than you in qualifying. So we didn't get prime Michael. We get a 42 years old Michael, and of course the first thing which goes off is quali.
Yeah.
So what I think happens in 2012 is that both of them are pretty equal in quali.
Yes.
And so both of them are exceptional racers on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so both would drive excellent races. We assume that in 2012, since Michael was able to start a winning cycle, he not only is as competitive as he was as Rosberg, but even more, he's even more competitive. Okay, I'll explain a bit better. In reality, in 2012, we think that Michael was as good as Rosberg, if not even better.
I think
that
it was easily better.
The sport.
Mm.
So, by comparison, in this scenario in which Michael is at Ferrari, he would be in 2012 even better than Rosberg, but not only that, he has a winning car in a team he's set up to win, and so he would perform even better in this scenario than he did in reality in 2012.
Yes.
And that is enough to make him as competitive as Alonso was in 2012.
I think Fernando would still have a better season, but I think Michael would do his typical Michael things and not get involved in incidents, not get involved in petty little disputes and squabbles. I think you get lucky with things like Spa and Suzuka, and I think it would be like, I think the way I'd put it is he'd have a 1984 Niki Lauda kind of season, still fantastic performances, just not on the Saturdays, good on the Sundays, and I think Alonso would just. I think that Alonso's. I think in a teammate battle against Schumacher, I don't think his pettiness would necessarily get the better of him because he wouldn't be as attacked regularly as like he was with 2007 Hamilton, as he had been in other seasons with other drivers with other teams. but I think that he would just get chipped away by Michael's consistency. I think that Michael would make the most of the wet weather because I think even in 2012, Michael was a better wet weather driver than Fernando. I think he would chip away like the races where, because there was a lot of anomalous races in 2012. I think the races where there was some sort of errors or there was sort of things, Michael would mitigate his own errors and would do overall really well. I think Malaysia, he qualified. I can't remember where he qualified, but he was running like top 3 at the start when Grosjean took him out. I think that he could have been because I mean, Alonso obviously won did a really good race in Malaysia, but his only battle was Sergio Perez. I mean, come on, Perez did a good race, but he shouldn't. But I think if Michael had been there, I think he'd have won it. I think he'd have won if he was in Perez's situation.
Yes, but Alonso was driving a midfield card.
I agree. So was Michael.
Okay, no, the Mercedes wasn't. It was better than Ferrari at the beginning of the year. Okay.
Yeah.
The Mercedes was. So the Mercedes started clearly not top 2 car, but it was the best of the midfield. And the midfield, I say Mercedes, Lotus, Williams, Ferrari, Force India, Sauber.
Yes.
So these 6 teams are the midfield at the beginning of the year. And this midfield is not like the current day midfield, which is miles off. It was a midfield that could threaten at every race the top 2 teams.
Maldonado. I had to say that because it's Maldonado.
Okay, but Mercedes was the best of the midfield. They won China on merit. They were very competitive in Monaco when they brought an upgrade. I mean, if Michael didn't get the penalty in Spain, Michael would have won the race and it would have been a double podium at Monaco. There's already 2 race wins on pure performance for the car. So the Mercedes wasn't bad at the beginning of the year. It became bad because they brought an upgrade at Monaco and then they brought nothing else. Just development pieces for the 2013 car.
Can I just say, this is something I mentioned, I think, before the pod started, but Michael, because I did a video on this exact topic on him at Mercedes. And if you take away his incident with Grosjean in Malaysia, if you take away his wheel nut problem in China, if you take away, admittedly, his own incident in Spain that then gave him the penalty for Monaco, he would have been leading the standings after Monaco. He would have been ahead of Alonso, who'd on about 90 points. And obviously, I'm not saying he would have won a championship in a Mercedes because they fell off and because of that sort of stuff. But his consistency, admittedly, yes, he did have a couple of Kimi Räikkönen 2021 moments where he just forgot how to drive. But in terms of overall performance, I think he was really, and that's why I say he was better than Rosberg, because yes, Rosberg had his good moments in China, but Rosberg basically had China handed to him on a platter because of Schumacher's problem. And because of everyone else seeming to not be able to, like the double DRS on that Mercedes was really overpowered. I don't get me wrong, Rosberg wasn't a bad driver. He wasn't a fantastic driver. He was always on that level that was slightly below the very best and slightly above the top of the midfield drivers. He was kind of in a weird kind of limbo phase. He wasn't as good as the likes of Hamilton, Raikkonen, Vettel, Alonso, Schumacher, Maldonado, but he was better than the likes of Glock. Maybe not
Perez,
those kind of Kobayashi, those kind of guys.
Di Resta Sutil.
Those kind of guys, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna give my opinion on what happens is that in 2012 it's gonna be, if in this scenario in which the Ferrari is very competitive because Michael succeeded in making Ferrari a winning team.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, there is Alonso and Michael fighting for the title with Vettel and Hamilton, but they get a lot of problems, so they eventually drop out. And through sheer consistency, you just get Michael and Alonso on a way better Ferrari than it was in reality in 2012.
Yes.
So either Michael gets the same misfortune he got in 2012, which means Alonso gets a massive starting lead. And at that point, Alonso is going to win the title. Sorry. Even if they perform very similarly, Alonso is going to win the title. But if that doesn't happen, and so it remains a very close fight, probably I would say Alonso fails to win it, because he starts to feel the pressure. He starts to think that the team is not on his side, that they give preference. Basically, a repeat of 2007. Again, better managed by both parts. They're not gonna get Ferrari disqualified. They ain't gonna get feisty on track, no crashes. But clearly, Alonso starts to suffer the pressure, unlike Michael, and Michael wins. Then in 2013, they still both have the contract. Nothing big happened that either of them has to cancel the contract on the spot. And so they both carry on into 2014. And at this point, assuming again that Ferrari is a very competitive car, at this point Alonso wins the title because Michael became too old. Like this entire discussion on the premise that on a competitive car, Michael does not make the mistakes he actually did in those years, and actually drives very consistently. And so at this point, again, if he does these mistakes in 2012, it makes it more dubious if Alonso actually loses the title. But in 2014, I think by then the age that Michael has means Alonso starts to outperform him even in qualifying. And then Alonso has the age in qualifying and beats him regularly.
I don't think it'd necessarily be the age either. I think, yes, the age might play a part, but I think also coming off the back of 2012, which would have been a very hard-fought season, I think he might either A, he'd have just retired knowing he had the 8th title, or B, just would have just happily seen out like a Niki Lauda, just seen out his final season, got a win or two, and then buggered off.
Assuming no incident on the skis.
Oh yeah, I don't think that sort of stuff would have happened. I think he would have. I mean, obviously that was in the December of 2013. That wasn't in that was after.
Right.
Yeah,
I thought it was December 2012. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, it was December 2013.
Okay, there is no problem for Michael to do 2013 then. Yes.
Do you also think he then takes over his old role from 07 to 09 and then still does like development work, or do you think he just calls it quits entirely after that?
I think he quits entirely. He
And
did
maybe like an ambassador like Niki Lauda.
Peter, do you have anything to say?
I think.
What did you think about the prospect of Alonso Vettel at Ferrari in 2014? But the Ferrari is competitive.
I can't possibly think of a realistic scenario where Vettel leaves Red Bull at that point. Certainly not for Ferrari. I mean, I don't think either him nor Alonso would have wanted that, to be honest. And again, Alonso to Ferrari was not going to happen with Vettel there, and only did happen once he. No, it did. It was a swap. Well, not a swap, but yeah, he did. He got out of the way for him. That doesn't. That's not very realistic. But I think Michael is probably end of 2013. He decides that's enough, and then you can throw the butterfly effect in there about whether or not that skiing accident does still happen.
One thing I will just say. Another potential driver to go alongside Alonso in 2014, and I know I've been glazing him a lot in the in some Discord servers. Yes, because he was the second choice after Raikkonen. He was. I think he would have at least done something in that car if it was like one of the better ones.
Well, anyway, in this scenario in which Michael creates a winning team for himself in 2012 and 2014, then yes, in 2014 they have to choose a driver. It does not have to be the successor of Michael, so it will be Raikkonen first, and then Maldonado second choice. I don't see why Raikkonen would not come back, so it's going to be Alonso Raikkonen as it was in real life.
It literally be Schumacher got replaced by Raikkonen, then Schumacher got replaced by Raikkonen again.
Otherwise, the other scenario is Michael creates a winning team for his own successor. And at this point, Peter says he cannot see how this swap may happen. I can kind of see it because Michael will have 4 years of time to convince Vettel to make the move.
And also the Ferrari would have been the quote-unquote best car. So the Red Bull, going from Red Bull to Ferrari would have been a step up rather than a step down.
No. In this scenario, the Ferrari is not competitive until 2014. So Vettel
the Red Bull is either way. The Red Bull is still amazing, and it's still where he's been for years. Like it's
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think
Not
we've
really.
exhausted all the options. I think me and you have exhausted all the options. I think Peter feels a bit left out, to be honest.
I think Massa's even more of a nobody. Schumacher's career record is slightly more better decorated, and maybe the skiing crash doesn't happen, and he's still around and present.
And then maybe Mick
doing
Schumacher's career becomes better and Con is happy.
And he's doing his podcast appearances and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And everyone stops feeling sorry for Mick.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, God, we're not going to talk about this, but he would have been Mick's manager probably, and he would have been behind the scenes in a similar fashion to Jos, probably making sure he was put in a decent seat, and
Mick would not
Yeah,
have been treated the way he was at Haas if
Oh yeah, they
Michael
would have been much
was,
nicer to him.
conscious.
Or if they did treat him like that and comforted him the same, Michael would have just come in and mate, you can fuck off, mate.
He probably would have. I mean, Mick probably would have bullshitted his way into a seat with Ferrari at some point as well. Maybe instead of Lewis.
I think Mick would have been a better driver overall. I think it was the same case like Bruno Senna. I think he would have. I think he would have had some sort of thing without Michael not being there.
Yeah, but it feels like this is a way that Lewis can get screwed twice, because he gets screwed out of a Mercedes seat and then gets screwed out of a Ferrari seat.
Yes. We all love the downfall of Lewis Hamilton on this podcast. We don't really.
Conclusions. We saw a scenario in which Michael gets to drive for Ferrari in 2009. And we kind of agree that he scores some points across the year. And then in 2012, he gets renewed for 2 years. And in those 2 years, basically nothing changes. And he's quite thoroughly beaten by Alonso both years, 2010 more than 2011. And at this point, we again believe that they keep the status quo in which both drivers are equally important. And at this point, we imagine 2 different scenarios. The first scenario is this comeback is all about creating a winning team for his successor. And so basically nothing changes because Alonso still doesn't win 2012 and 2014. Michael probably does way better than Massa, but does not match Alonso because the car isn't up for winning, and so Alonso is outdriving the car. And then 2014, we probably see Alonso Vettel. The other scenario is Michael created a winning team for his own benefit. And so in 2012 and 2014, if successful, and this is a pretty big if, we're not going to cover if Michael is unsuccessful, because if Michael is unsuccessful, we get exactly what already happened in reality. So if Michael succeeds, and if Michael stops making mistakes, he may actually beat Alonso to the title. Otherwise, every other scenario, Alonso wins 2012. Every other scenario in which the Ferrari is competitive in 2012, Alonso wins. Unless Michael does a very okay season, in which he's very consistent and makes no mistakes, no incidents, then Michael actually beats Alonso, because Alonso cannot handle the pressure. And then we get to 2014, assuming the car is still competitive. Alonso this time wins the title, and Michael bows down from the sport once and for all. Did I miss anything?
Don't think so.
No.
Okay, all the other teams, basically nothing changes because we kind of see McLaren kiss the lineup. Then Hamilton leaves and can go to Mercedes in 2014 because Mercedes is going to have Rosberg and Heidfeld, and they're going to drop Heidfeld for Hamilton. So we actually get Rosberg-Hamilton lineup from there onwards. Red Bull changes nothing.
Renault.
Lotus changes nothing because we still get Raikkonen and Grosjean. Williams changes nothing. Massa goes somewhere, we don't know where, but way low down the field, so it does not matter.
Well,
Yeah,
that does
it's
change
a problem.
Williams. Then in the hybrid era, they'd have Bottas and, God forbid, Maldonado stays with
Yes,
them.
finally, Maldonado in race winning machinery.
Yeah, this doesn't really change a huge amount of things otherwise.
It literally changes Ferrari.
Yeah, it just makes them
I
slightly
wonder
better
why.
for a couple of years, and maybe Mercedes fractionally worse.
Yeah.
Very underwhelming end result. So at the end of the day, that Michael was in Formula One in 2012, 2012, and where he was matters very little in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so in short, if Schumacher did return with Ferrari in 2009, nothing changes. Sorry for wasting your time. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify. You can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Goodbye.
You have to live a life. All the time you have to live a life.